What is the scariest, creepiest thing you have seen heard?
Silent scan.
I was on vacation in Ithaca with my boyfriend at the time. We had literally, I'm talking 10 minutes, just gotten into town and stopped at a suspension bridge near Cornell's campus. I'm terrified of heights and, so, my boyfriend was coaxing me step by step over the bridge. It was gorgeous and we stopped at the middle to take a picture. On the side we had come from there was a parking lot with steps leading to the bottom of the gorge, but on the far side there were hiking paths with no barrier. A woman walked past us and offered to take a picture for us. We declined and she smiled and walked quickly to the far side of the bridge, where she smoothly jumped off into the gorge. There was not a second of hesitation, it was almost like she expected the path to keep going. The sound of a person hitting the ground from a jump like that sticks with you.
Silent scan.
I was about 15 minutes from finishing the night shift at work when there was a massive crash on one of the windows in the office, so I get up and go to check it out. Someone has thrown quite a sizable rock through one of the windows on the front of the building. This is made especially weird because I'm working in the industrial district at 11:30 at night, with none of the other businesses open. I go back to my desk, put a quick call through to security to let them know and decide to head home. As I'm leaving the building I'm freaking myself out about it more and more and end up running to my car, getting in and taking off. I'm almost home and I've started to calm down a bit when I realize that I didn't unlock my car when I got in. It had been unlocked the whole time. I do a quick check with my hand in the back seat for any possible murderers that might be hanging around there, but there's nothing there. Fast forward 30 minutes. I've called a friend of mine who says he's out drinking, so I decide I'm going to join him. I jump on my bicycle and start riding over. I'm doodling along the road on my bike, it's a nice night, and I'm in no big rush, just enjoying the moonlight when I hear someone riding behind me. I straighten up and stick to one side of the road. He passes me really slowly and, when he is right beside me, he shoots me a smile I can describe as purely fucking insane. I kind of flinch and am taken aback as he rides on. That's when I realize. He is riding my mom's bike. Needless to say, I sprint the fuck home. When I get there, sure enough her bike is missing and one of my car's doors is open. The back left one. I was driving, and had no need to open that door.
Silent scan.
My parents bought their first house back in 1972. It was a fixer-upper, but they decided to move in right away and fix things as time money permitted. Within a few days of moving in, the new neighbors came over to introduce themselves. They also let my parents know that the previous owners had moved out after a nasty divorce. They had lost their second baby from SIDS, and their relationship went downhill from there. My parents were horrified, more so because they were newly pregnant and couldn't imagine going through such a thing. They eventually pretty much forgot all about it. Life went on. They were in love with their new life and their new house. In preparation for the baby, they decided to wallpaper the nursery. Now, my dad told my mom there was no need in wallpapering the inside of the closet, but she insisted. She was kneeling down, scraping off old paint inside of the closet, when her eyes fell upon something that made her blood turn to ice. Written in crayon, at about eye level for a kindergartner, in childish scrawl was, "I killed the baby."
Silent scan.
Well, I'll never forget this when my wife and I used to live in a town and back to some woods. We both took off work one day to get some things done in the yard, cutting the grass, weeding our large flower beds, laying mulch etc. Our yard wasn't big, it took about 2 full grass clipping bags. I would walk a couple of feet into the woods and dump them in a pile. As I'm walking back to empty the second bag, something in the middle of the woods catches my eye. Something out of place and it's moving. I crouched down to get a better look and I just froze. At first, I could make out a pair of shoes just swing back and forth, and then was able to see the legs and body of a teenager. There in the middle of the woods was a teenage boy who had hung himself. Next to the tree, I could see a skateboard leaning up against it. I yelled for my wife to call the police and started running back to try and save him, but he was gone. His body was limp and his head was just slumped over. His dark scruffy hair was slowly blowing in the breeze. The cops came and quickly cut him down and they were gone. As it turns out, he was having problems getting along with his parents, and this is what he decided to do.
Silent scan.
My dad died of cancer the day I turned 16 after about 2 weeks in a coma. It was really fast, less than 2 months between diagnosis and death. He died in the house. We had a hospice attendant and my mom was very good about seeing to him in those final days. Anyway, a lot of weird shit happened after he passed, but the one that still freaks me out when I think about it, happened about 12 hours before he took to bed for the last time. He was in our living room napping on the couch while my mom was in the kitchen cooking. No one else was home. Suddenly, he jerked awake and was shouting for my mom in a very loud, agitated voice. Clearly angry with her. "Beverly. Don't do that. Don't ever do that again." She ran into the room, alarmed, and asked what he was talking about, and he said, "Don't do that. Don't walk past me like that in that long black wig. Sometimes I think he saw death."
Silent scan.
My old co-worker had a son that was in his mid-30s, and he had a son named Hunter that was 4 or 5. She said that Hunter would have bad dreams, and that he would sleep with his dad when he got scared. One night his dad woke up because he heard Hunter calling him. But he was calling him by his name, not dad. So he went to his room and he was asleep. He woke him up and said, "Hunter, you were calling me. Is everything okay?" And Hunter said, "Dad, when they call you you're not supposed to answer," and fell back asleep. He asked him about it in the morning, but he said he didn't remember saying it. I get chills when I think about it.
Silent scan.
I'm a journalist and was told this doozy by a woman I interviewed for a true crime story. When this woman was a young girl, say 8 years old, she started to come downstairs at night to tell her father that there was a man in her closet. He tells her there's no such thing as the boogeyman and sends her back to bed. This happens on and off for like a week. Finally, he gets frustrated and walks her back to the room and says, "I'll show you there's nothing in your closet," and goes to open the door. It opens an inch and then he feels someone slam it shut. Turns out there really was a man in her closet. This guy was a perv who would come into the house every night and stare at the girl from the closet while she slept. The dad kicked the shit out of him, and the perv went to prison for many years. I researched her story 20 years after this happened. The guy had just gotten out of jail again, and no one could find him.
Silent scan.
In middle school, class was letting out and my best friend and I were walking to our buses. He had to stop by the music room to pick up his instrument to take home, so I told him goodbye. I kept walking, turned around the corner, and he popped out of another door with his instrument and startled me on purpose. We walked and talked for another minute, and as I was walking away from him to get on my bus, I told him goodbye for good this time. That weekend he was killed in a car crash in front of his house, he was ejected and his family's car rolled over him. Now I relive that last interaction I had with him every once in a while. Definitely creepy.
Silent scan.
I was about 6 years old when our washer broke, and we had to go to the laundromat at a little shopping center to do our laundry for a little while. I remember it was a warm June afternoon just before dusk. I was sitting on the back of my mom's car eating some candy, when I heard the roar of engines coming down the boulevard in front of me. I could see down the road it was 2 vehicles, a primer-colored hot rod and a van racing at top speed side by side. As they neared the intersection where I was at, the road rose ever so slightly, and they were going so fast both vehicles rose and collided sides in midair. The van kept going, but the car rolled twice fast and hopped on the third roll, and as the car rose the guy was coming out ever so much, and his head was chopped clean off when the car landed. The real freaky part is the head rolled into the gutter about 6 feet directly in front of where I was sitting.
Silent scan.
In my last apartment, every morning, 3 a.m. I would hear this woman screaming help in this loud, clear, blood-curdling shriek. I tried asking my landlord about it, and he got real quiet and wide-eyed, and never said a damn thing about it. None of the other tenants would talk to me.
Silent scan.
The scariest thing to happen to me. This was back in the late 90s, when I was still living in the Philippines. Well, when I was around 4 or 5, my uncle brought me a little porcelain jester doll he had found from a flea market overseas. I forgot what I named him. His face was painted to look like a jester's, with a white face and red streaks of paint running from atop his eyebrows down to his cheeks. I had a strange affinity to the doll, and would constantly bring it up to my room, because I considered it a pretty toy or something. However, each time that doll entered my room, I would come down with a fever or some other sickness, so my mom told me never to bring it in my room anymore. She's very superstitious. Somehow, the doll kept appearing in my room without anyone bringing it up there, but my mom wouldn't believe me. Who would believe a 5-year-old girl, anyway? The last straw was when the doll popped up in my room yet again, and I got a bad case of the measles. My mother ended up burning it and burying it near a mango tree in our yard. Since then, we moved to the US and up to now, I still have no idea if that cursed doll is buried in our old yard.
Silent scan.
So this one time, I got home at night, but before my roommate. I watched TV for a bit and went to sleep. My room is down the hallway and to the left, and my roommate's room is at the end of it. I left my door open that night, and around 3 a.m. I wake up and in the darkness I noticed that a person the size of my roommate was tiredly walking towards his room, dragging what looked like a bag full of clothes. I remember thinking, what the hell is this guy doing laundry in the middle of the night? And go back to sleep without giving it a second thought. Fast forward to the next morning. I wake up, get ready for work, and I see that my roommate's room is closed and left for work. In the evening when I came back I noticed my roommate was not home yet, and around 7 p.m. he walks in the apartment with a hamper full of clean clothes, and I asked him how his day had been. He then proceeds to tell me how he had gone to visit his mom after work the day before, and took some laundry, and ended up spending the night over there. He never even set foot in our apartment until the next day.
Silent scan.
One time, a few years ago, this old man was burning the ditch behind our house. We didn't think much of it until the fire got out of control, and the old man was nowhere to be seen. The fire department arrived and put out the fire, but the old man was still nowhere to be seen. My brother and I were looking out the window watching all of this. Then the sheriff arrived, and he and the firefighters were huddled around in the same area. I went to go give an update to my mom, who was in another room, on the phone with my dad, and when I got back, they were pulling a charred corpse out of the burned-up landscape. He was completely 100% burned to a crisp. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen in my entire life, and the look on his face still haunts me to this day. TLDR, I saw a man burned to death, and now I can't sleep at night.
Silent scan.
I was in a terrible car accident about 10 years ago with my brother and some of our friends. We went 50 miles per hour straight into a tree. I remember waking up in the car, hearing lots of screaming, and seeing a lot of blood. Next thing I remember is waking up outside the car, hearing my brother crying my name. We were all laying on the ground. The front end of the car was wrapped around the tree. The alarm was going off, and the headlights lights were flashing directly on the tree. I had a concussion and was obviously confused, and I asked one of my friends what was happening. He said, "The car is dying." I still can distinctly picture the lights flashing on the tree, and hear the screams of all my friends, and especially my brother calling out my name. It haunts me to this day. I have chills just thinking about it. Worst thing is, this was right by my house, and I have to drive past where the tree was almost every day. They eventually cut the tree down. The night when this happened, my parents were at a friend's house. They told us that the music that they had on randomly shut itself off, and at the same time they heard tons of sirens close by. They had a bad feeling, so they left and went home. They walked into our house to find my brother's video game paused like he was going to be right back. There was a voicemail from the hospital on our phone.
Silent scan.
Me and my mom were out in the country at my grandparents' house when I was 13 and it was surrounded by bushes. It was around 2 in the morning, and I was just sitting alone in the living room on my laptop, when I look out the window, and I see something face-like in the bushes, but it was hard to make out because of the darkness. I was of course freaked out, but I calmed myself down because I remembered reading an article on how the human brain tries to make out faces in everything we see. So I just stared at it for a while, chuckling to myself. When my stomach just hit the ground, the face blinked, and then slowly retreated back into the bushes. I was up all night under my covers with a golf club by my side. I have never liked going there ever since.
Silent scan.